Gabba the game night, Gabba the game night, Gabba the game night, yay! Hey!
I posted.
Are you gonna say it?
Yes. What up, Dad?
Okay, do my intro. 3.
What up, guys?
Alright, what are we playing?
I don't know.
Well, hey guys, Gabba TGK here, and I am playing some Stranger in Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, Matty from Fantasy.
That was not Matty from Vidisi doing that intro. What's up, guys? I don't know.
And we're going into this court place. And I forgot to double check the volume to go down, so it's fine.
Fool's Missive
34.
The Gilia Court. This twin-headed skyscraper once played host to a crystal, and as such contains the technology needed to control its power. I was told that in its origin world, Dimension 15, the crystal was stolen, which was the trigger that allowed darkness to engulf that realm. I have no way of knowing what the fate of that place was, but it appears that the Lufinians brainstormed a way to send perfectly measured packages of darkness its way. I suppose they were left with no choice but to abandon the subtler methods they usually prefer.
Wow, I barely played Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah, it's meh. I mean, you played it more than I have. It's not like I'm telling you anything about it.
It's not a terrible game, but...
Looks new.
Remember to mask up like Jack and the boys.
Yeah.
Tower filled with monsters.
That's about it. They gave all the boys masks. And the girls hats.
Well, right now, mask would serve you better out in the real world. In the Final Fantasy world, you know, I don't know. Or are those the original Sky Warriors returning to Bats by Garland?
Wow, maybe. Wait,
There's only supposed to be 5 of them. That hair, man, does not look good. Her hair looks okay. I know that feeling.
It's about power. With the hunger we devour. His drive to kill chaos.
My flash drive is gone. I dropped it somewhere.
Oh no.
Find Jack's flash drive.
I had 32 terabytes of porn on that. That's a lot.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
I have like 1 terabyte of storage on my computer.
I thought you were gonna say
No,
you
I
had
have
1 terabyte of porn.
Oh no, I have way more than that. I just spread over multiple computers. And I guess to be fair, I have 1 terabyte SSD and 2 terabytes on my HDD.
That's also what I have.
I know. Anyway, we're playing Final Fantasy Stranger in Paradise, in part because this year marks the 35th anniversary of the original Final Fantasy.
Yes.
In Japan, anyway. We didn't get it here in the US until 1990. But nonetheless.
And also, this is the 5th anniversary of Street Fighter this year.
Yeah, and Mega Man.
Yeah.
1987.
Well, they haven't done anything for Mega Man.
A banner year for video games. 1987 is when we got The Legend of Zelda in the States. Of course, it released originally in Japan in 1986. But again, to my point, I thought maybe I'd bring some Final Fantasy trivia to the party this week.
Ooh, Final Fantasy trivia.
Yeah. Now, I do have a couple quizzes I could try to ask you questions, but I didn't want to distract you, so this is just going to be a little Did You Know? Specifically from Final Fantasy Wiki, Did You Know? So, some game facts.
I love game facts. In the original Final Fantasy 1, nothing freaking worked.
Screw you. I love the original Final Fantasy. And what do you mean the original Final Fantasy 1? It's just the original Final Fantasy. The 1 is redundant. But I digress. Okay, I'm not doing this thing.
I mean, it's still Final Fantasy 1 because in Dawn of Souls it's Final Fantasy 1 and 2.
Okay, it's still just Final Fantasy, and you said the original Final Fantasy 1 as if there's multiple ones. You sure about that? Oh, the people are talking on screen. I should shut up and let them do our job.
I don't know what they're saying.
Let's take the character's audio from this game, put it over another game series, and that'll be the commentary for it.
Put it over the original Final Fantasy.
We'll put it over like Tome or something.
I ain't do that here. Why would I wanna?
Alright, anyway, if it ain't Friday Night Funkin', let's do some Final Fantasy trivia.
Ow! Okay, what the frick?
So, the Final Fantasy series is one of the top 20 best-selling video game franchises of all time, with a question mark. That's weird. Why did these all have question marks at the end? Oh, because did you know? With a question mark. I got it.
Ah.
Like, did you know
Gaming?
that the Final Fantasy series is one of the top 20 best-selling video game franchises of all time?
Did you know gaming?
Did you know in the GBA, PS, PSP, mobile, and Steam versions of Final Fantasy, the gravestone in Elfheim reads, "Here lies Link," a reference to Nintendo's Legend of Zelda?
Yes, I did know.
Now then, we've destroyed the power source.
Is it Link in the original NES one, or is it Eldrick?
It's Edric.
Did I say it? I said Eldrick. I'm an idiot.
Yeah. He's not an Eldritch being.
Did you know the original Final Fantasy is the most widely released game in the series and is available on 15 different platforms?
Honestly, I'm not surprised.
Did you know the original Final Fantasy has smaller overall HP and damage outputs than its main series successors, resulting in characters with 3-digit HP and a 2000 HP final boss? I did know that, because I played that game a lot. Honestly, one of my 4 favorite games of all time. Depending on my mood, I might even say it's my favorite. It's definitely one that hooked me on RPGs.
Yeah. Honestly, my favorite version of the original Final Fantasy play is the Dawn of Souls version.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is the original NES, just for I'm nostalgic for the graphics and the sound of that one. But also, as far as any Final Fantasy goes, it's the one I'm most likely to just pick up and play again for just no specific reason, you know.
Yeah.
Partially probably because it's smaller than a lot of them too, but you know, it's just fun to cruise through a playthrough of Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
And I feel like for the technology available at the time, it's actually got a fairly in-depth story.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a lot of character-driven story arcs, but the actual plot of the game I think is pretty good.
It's definitely better than the first Dragon Quest.
Alright, did you know Final Fantasy II is the Final Fantasy game to include the first Final Fantasy game to include temporary party members? Well, that's not hard since it's the second one. Did you know that the one before didn't have it? I mean, come on. Also, did you know Final Fantasy II is the first Final Fantasy game to feature invisible passageways?
Wow, that's a terrible freaking inclusion to say.
Did you know that Final Fantasy II is the first main Final Fantasy game that doesn't use levels to govern stat growth?
Frick that, though.
That's one of your main complaints about the game.
It's like, it can work if it's done well. It's not done well in Final Fantasy.
We're just rocking the Final Fantasy II trivia here.
Honestly, Final Fantasy II is my least favorite Final Fantasy.
I understand, but I think it's an underrated game. I know it's not great, but I don't think it's bad either. And I think it made some important advances in the series.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get to Final Fantasy 3 without 2. You don't get to 4 without 2 and 3. I mean, you got I'm obviously without 1, of course, but you got to build.
And I believe the same system of you doing things increases like just that specific skill was used in like the Saga series, I think it's called.
Yeah.
I haven't played them.
I'm not a huge fan of the leveling system, and it can be meandering a bit, and there's rooms with nothing in them, and then you get locked in and have to fight a monster. Yeah, I get there's things that are wrong with the game. I'm not saying it's perfection, and it's certainly not as good as the games that came before it, and I don't think it's even as good as the one that preceded it, but I still think it's a good game.
Yeah. If you want to be technical, that's even kind of a similar system to the Elder Scrolls games. Just they do it a lot better.
Well, did you know that Final Fantasy II on the NES has the smallest inventory in the series, allowing for only 32 individual items?
Wow, that is not a lot.
This is further exacerbated with key items being stored in the inventory, leading to a total of merely 18 available items that can be stored by endgame.
Wow, that is nothing.
I didn't remember having issues with the inventory when we played it, but it's been a while.
Maybe it was changed in other versions.
Could be. You're right. This is the NES version, and we played the PlayStation version.
Yeah.
I think when we did our playthrough.
Even though the GBA is probably the best version.
We even played that or the Dawn of Souls version.
Either GBA Pixel Remaster. I haven't played the Pixel Remaster version.
Also, did you know Final Fantasy II is the first Final Fantasy game featuring a battle the player is supposed to lose? I mean, again, if it's literally the second one in a series of 15-plus games, the second one was the first one to include this. I mean, yeah, it'd be one thing if you're like Final Fantasy XIV was the first one to do something.
Final Fantasy XIV was the first one to be so bad they had to reset the entire game.
Final Fantasy II is the first game in which handedness matters. The two southpaws, which means the left-handers in the game, have names that begin with L.
Plot.
Over the course of countless experiments, we have determined that the very fact of human existence is the source of chaos phenomena. Though we had hoped to bring all native organisms with us into our glorious future, I strongly urge the removal of any life forms that prove unmanageable. With seemingly perfect timing, the latest proposal from our extraplanar collaborator seems in line with this suggestion. An official consideration for enacting both ideas in tandem is in progress. Wow, they've been looking at the current United States, huh?
Anyway, back to the trivia now.
Trivia!
Trivia.
Can we get a Final Fantasy Trivial Pursuit?
That'd be awesome.
I don't know if that'd really be enough. I mean, that would have to get into, like, minutia of the plots and whatnot. And individual items in games. I don't know, I'd still buy it.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you know Final Fantasy III, and of course this is the actual Final Fantasy III, not Final Fantasy VI on SNES. But the original Final Fantasy III is the first Final Fantasy game with summon magic?
Wow, once again, not very hard.
Again, this whole is the first. If it ain't about, halfway or more into the series, that's not really that impressive a stat.
Well, to be fair, halfway into the series is like Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, at that point I can understand why this is the first time in 7 games they tried this, but it's the 3rd game. We're still building here.
I'd say even 4 and 5 would be.
We didn't even get the 3rd game in the States. I mean, that's how unadvanced the game series was in some people's eyes.
God, what is going on here? You guys are doing great. I left.
Dude, half of these are just, did you know this such and such Final Fantasy is the first to do this? Anyway, I guess I'll continue. Did you know Final Fantasy III is the first game in the series to have auto-targeting physical attacks for the original release?
Wow.
Did you know Final Fantasy IV, also known as Final Fantasy II on the SNES, is the first Final Fantasy game with romantic elements between playable characters? I'm looking at you, Rose and Cecil.
Wow, it had romance. I can't believe.
Dude, Final Fantasy IV was a revelation, though, when it came out on SNES as Final Fantasy II. To go from the original Final Fantasy, which I love, but then to get into that with, the in-depth storylines that actually feature on the characters and their relationships and their growth, that was amazing.
Yeah. Recommendation, don't play the SNES version.
Screw you, I love the SNES version.
It's missing a lot of content.
The only thing I don't like about the SNES version is that it's not 2 players.
The thing about the SNES version is it's missing, like, half of the character's abilities.
Okay, but the SNES version is still perfectly fine. If it's the one you can get your hands on, it's definitely worth playing. My only complaint is that you can't play it 2 players.
Yeah.
And to be fair, 2 players in Final Fantasy doesn't involve a whole lot, but it's still fun to be able to have a buddy actually play alongside you.
I recommend PlayStation or maybe Pixel Remaster.
I feel like you're just parroting what other people have to say.
No.
How much have you even played any version
Most people
besides?
won't recommend the PlayStation version.
PlayStation version is fine. Just
Yeah, I think it's fine.
the load times are a little long. But I mean, that's PlayStation.
They're not that bad.
No, they're not that bad. People who complain about load times on the PlayStation are just spoiled. Same people who complain about graphics on the Switch.
I can definitely understand for some games on the Switch, but then other games like, nah.
Okay, have you played an Atari game, sir?
Okay, now that's a bit different.
I'm just saying, as somebody who grew up starting with Atari, I appreciate modern graphics and don't feel like they have to be the end-all be-all. And if they're not perfect, I mean, come on. Like, even this, I'm picking on the character's hair and whatnot, but this still looks amazing.
I know, but a Switch game shouldn't look like a GameCube game or something.
And which one does?
I can't pick out.
And I don't tell me Mario Sunshine on the Switch.
Well, obviously Mario.
Exactly. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to the trivia.
There's some games
Or
that
not.
don't look like it. No, go back to it.
Wow, some worm gauntlets. You reckon worms actually wear those?
I don't care about
No.
any of that crap.
Continue on.
Gee, sorry, Jack. I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Light and dark. Who cares, right?
Come on. All of that's just background noise. All I care about is finding something to replace that purpose you lost. You got it.
Yeah, like an OnlyFans.
Daddy,
Kill.
What?
adopted.
It's a matter of principle.
I'd probably choose Sonic between Sonic and Huggy Wuggy.
Alright, back to the trivia.
Sorry, Johnny was asking me a question. Dude, he just hulked him. Or did he Loki him? Because it was Hulk doing it, but he was doing it to Loki. Double axe handle.
Alright,
Jack.
the trivia.
Well, you didn't seem all interested. You just wanted to argue about graphics, so...
I was interested. You should mention something else.
Dude, those
talking
dudes
about
with the
graphics.
scythe look awesome.
Oh, frick you, I'm dead. I'm not dead yet.
You're nearly dead, so watch it.
Well, I don't have any way to heal currently, so.
Well, maybe let your comrades do the fighting for right now.
Well, only Ash is alive, so.
Well, he can handle it.
Ash, what are you doing? Ash! Get in there!
Ash had the same idea I had for you.
Alright,
for
well, you
himself.
guys have fun. I'll just, you know, be over here. I'll just be over here, guys. I'll just be right over
How long
here,
has it
guys.
been?
Daddy,
What, Johnny?
this is Dr. A.
Wow. Sonic.exe?
Yes,
I guess I chose poorly then. Looked like regular Sonic to me.
you not just Dr.
Hey, there's a potion in there.
No.
Nope.
Oh,
Guru's
no.
goggles and Guru's gi. They're following you, dude.
Alright, now give me some trivia for Final Fantasy 4.
I don't think you deserve it.
I don't think you deserve.
You're a spoiled brat bitching about amazing graphics that we can only dream of. I mean, just the mere fact that you're even playing a video game is amazing.
It is. Where did you come from?
I suppose I'll bless you with a little more of this Did You Know trivia. Did you know Final Fantasy IV is the first Final Fantasy game to have save points? I did know that, actually.
Wow. Yeah, couldn't you only save like outside in Final Fantasy 3? Or
Yeah,
could you save
in the original Final Fantasy III. I'm not sure what any of the remakes are like.
Yeah, I haven't played the DS remake. Haven't played the DS version of Final Fantasy 4. It is definitely harder than any other version.
I mean, the Pixel Remaster has autosaves in it, so... Which is kind of lame, honestly.
Is that a GBA version of Final Fantasy 4?
I don't know, because the 3D version is on DS, right?
Yeah. Cactual.
Maybe, I'm not sure. Oh my god, I can't believe it had that little woo noise when it started to run. Listen to that. We must help Jack slaughter the mini cactus with
Get it, guys!
with the cartoony running sounds. That looked dirty.
The Cactual killed me.
Wow. How far back are you gonna have to go now?
I don't know.
How far back is that? Because I was paying attention to trivia.
I'm not super far back, but the
This sort of looks like the Shinra building in Final Fantasy VII.
Alright, I can go to this gate now. Oh. Oh, I don't know where I'm going.
Do you want me to pick up the trivia or?
Yes.
Alright, did you know that since Final Fantasy IV, each main series game has had exactly 3 non-guest female party members, with the exception of online games and Final Fantasy 15?
Huh.
Yeah, because Final Fantasy 15 is a total sausage party.
There are females in it sometimes.
In your
And
party?
guest characters sometimes. Yeah. Later in the game. That I haven't got to.
I thought it was just the 4 boys through the whole thing.
Nah, yeah, at certain points, each one will leave
Oh.
for a time by time.
Apparently you've played more of it than I have.
No, I haven't gotten to those points.
But did you know that Final Fantasy V introduced Mimic and Blue Magic?
I did know that.
And that Final Fantasy V was the first game in the series with infinite inventory space?
Honestly, best inclusion.
And that Final Fantasy V is the only main series Final Fantasy game to have more playable female characters than playable male characters?
Huh.
Wait, is that right? It's just, who is there besides Reyna and Ferris?
Also Gallus. Quill or whatever. Remember? After Gallus dies?
Nah, dude, it's been so long since we played
He gets
Final
replaced
Fantasy
by,
V.
like, his granddaughter or something.
Okay. So other than that, it's just Galuf and Dante?
Dante?
That's what we called him. I can't remember his real name.
What?
There you go.
We call his butts in the Japanese.
When we did our playthrough, we called him Dante, so that's all I could remember.
Dante from Devil May Cry?
I think we named him after Dante. We either named him after Dante from Clerks or Dante from Dante's Inferno, which Dante in Clerks was named after. So I guess either way. Did you know that Final Fantasy V is the only main series Final Fantasy game to have the number of playable characters equal to its chronological number?
Wow.
Wow. Did you know Final Fantasy V was the first game to spawn a sequel? What is OVA?
Original video animation or something.
An OVA called Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals.
Huh. Yeah, it's pretty much like an animated movie thing.
I figured that from your description of the acronym. Did you know that Final Fantasy VI was actually originally released as the Super Nintendo game Final Fantasy III?
Yes.
In the US? I just threw that in there. Did you know that Final Fantasy VI was the first game to allow the player to change party members? I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Because you
couldn't in Final Fantasy 4.
Yeah, you don't choose. They do switch out, but not based on your choice.
Which kind of sucks.
But
There's
not that many times that you really have the option to switch out characters, because they just leave and go do other stuff. I mean, they're not really available to you in Final Fantasy IV.
I wish you could at least choose your final party in Final Fantasy 4.
Yang gets hurt, and Palom and Porum get stoned.
But you can't choose your final party in Final Fantasy 4. You get
Tella
stuck.
dies.
Who do you get in Final Fantasy 4 as your final party? I know Kane is part of it, I think.
Kane, Edge is there. Kane, Cecil, Edge, Rosa, and...
Video? Maybe? No. No, isn't that the freaking Magic Moon guy?
Maybe.
I think he's part of your final party.
Soya?
Yeah. Frick you and your Reaper. Also, one neat thing about the DS version of Final Fantasy 4, you can actually get, like, special abilities throughout the game that you can equip on people. Even abilities from other classes. And abilities like dual cast and stuff.
I was making a note for myself on my phone. And one of the words in the note was crack, C-R-A-C-K. And it changed it to capitalized for some strange reason. Like, why do you need crack capitalized?
I don't know. Killed the cat girl, though.
Like, show that crack in the pavement some respect. You don't really have to, especially when they actually cost you more time or trouble, but I get what you're saying.
Why did I break that thing?
Anyway, would you like me to give you some more trivia?
Yeah.
Did you know that Final Fantasy VI is the main series game with the most guests? I don't know what that means, the most guests.
Do you mean the most party members?
Maybe.
But
That's definitely true. Anyway, moving on from that odd syntax. Did you know that Final Fantasy VI has one of the longest endings of any SNES game, taking a half hour to sit through entirely? Wow, is it really that long?
Maybe.
I mean, it's a pretty good ending, and they all escape, and they get their little name check. Hold on, I'm gonna go to our... I want to go see how long our finale was for that game. Because if the ending itself was 30 minutes...
Does the ending include the final boss, or...?
That's... I'm not sure. It doesn't specify, so...
Because, I mean, the final boss...
I would think the ending is just what happens when you stop playing. Once you can't control the characters anymore, that's the ending.
So pretty much as soon as the final boss is dead.
That's what I would say. I'm not sure what this is saying. Hold on, I just clicked on... I linked to the past randomizer feature.
That's what a speed one would say, too. Because that's when the speed ones end. I believe.
Playlist.
Yo, I got Save the Queen. Yo, that is way weaker. What the frick? Why is it so much weaker? That's supposed to be like the ultimate paladin sword.
This is not showing all of my playlists. What's going on, YouTube?
Why is Save the Queen so much weaker? Oh well, guess I'll do that. What's with all these freaking stuff being so much weaker than what I have?
Can you search within a channel on YouTube? I'm not logged into my account on this computer. That's
maybe.
why well, hold on. Let me use my main computer.
I think so.
Hold on. Oh, have you finished this level yet?
No.
You got my hopes up going into the menu.
I'm sorry, I was upping some of my equipment stuff.
Alright, anyway. Final Fantasy 3 is the playlist. If anybody wants to check it out.
Yeah.
Over at youtube.com/VidioCTV.
Alpha 556. I don't know. It wasn't recommended for I played it really.
SNES version's totally fine though.
I've seen the Pixel Remaster has a very cool.
And the SNES version is 2 players too, so it gives me what I need.
Yeah.
Anyway, our Final Fantasy video. Well, 41 minutes and 39 seconds.
It's like 10 minutes beat Kefka.
Yeah, let's see where the ending actually. Now, to be fair, if there's a long credit sequence, we may have cut out before the credits were finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this pretty much is just the Kefka fight, and then the ending. So, hold on. There's the angel version of Kefka. You know, we don't have 30 minutes of ending on here. Okay, Kefka's down at about 18 minutes into the video. So we got about 23 minutes
The barrier must have gone
of
down
ending.
somewhere.
So did we cut out like 8 minutes of?
No, we didn't cut out anything, because there's the end with like the airship flying.
You okay?
Now to be fair, I don't think we played this. We did play the SNES version though, didn't we? We played on the Super Nintendo Classic.
But it's not like our job's over.
So
Maybe they include the final boss. Which,
maybe,
Growing stronger.
but even that, there's no guarantee exactly how long it's going
Yeah.
to take.
These are probably found the fastest speed one.
I see it 23 minutes more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe there's a rounding up.
I don't think I cut anything out anyway. I don't.
We should collect
There's no real
ourselves.
need to, unless maybe I skipped the credits for some reason.
Job fees.
No, because the credits just play over the airship. Without actually sitting down and watching the video, I can't say for sure that I didn't skip something. But it doesn't really look like the sort of end credits that you would necessarily need to skip.
Yeah.
It's not just, you know, names over a black background. There's actually something going on that's entertaining, or relatively speaking. I love the way our thumbnails for that game changed from like just a mashup of the box art to all of a sudden everyone featuring Celeste holding a stick.
It's lovely.
But anyway, again, if you want to check that out, youtube.com/VidioCTV. That's our Final Fantasy 3 playlist. We also just did the original Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 3.5, and we'll get into Final Fantasy 4. Yeah, probably not this year, but you never know. We've got Cuphead DLC coming up.
I can't wait to play the Pixel Remaster of Final Fantasy 6.
Actually, by the time this video goes up, I think our Cuphead DLC videos will have started.
Oh, I died for it.
And then we've got Live Alive coming up in July as well. We're going to be streaming those two over at twitch.tv/VidioC, so you can follow along with us over there before we cut them up and throw them up on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And we'll also be streaming Stardew Valley with Alex Descend3R, and you can check out those VODs on her channel. Oh yeah, enough promoting. Let me get back to. Oh, check out our podcast too. Anchor.fm/LexiconPod. Anchor.fm/LexiconPodcast. We have a YouTube channel for that as well. You can find links in the description of this video.
Have you seen any of the output at all for the
No, I
Pixel
haven't.
Remaster?
No, I haven't. And of course, that's still like 3 series away. We're going to be doing that on the channel too. We're playing through all the Final Fantasies, even though we technically already played through Final Fantasy 6. We're going to do it again just to play the Pixel Remaster, just for the opera.
Yeah.
But I digress. Back to the trivia, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
That Lesser Black Widow, that's the MCU movie? Okay, did you know the music track, The Magic House, played when you visit Jador in the World of Ruin Final Fantasy VI, was originally composed for Final Fantasy II?
Huh.
No, how would I know that? Did you know that Final Fantasy VII is the highest selling game in the entire series with over 18 million copies sold?
Yeah.
Well deserved too, as I think that's the pinnacle of Final Fantasy. You could argue that 6 is, and I wouldn't argue too hard against that. 6 is amazing.
Yeah, I prefer 6.
But I love Final Fantasy 7.
I mean, did 7 get a 2D, 3D opera scene in its Pixel Remaster? I don't think so. It didn't get Pixel Remaster.
Did 6 get a scene where the main character and his girlfriend had sex and everybody watched from the airship? Sorry.
Oh, you don't remember that scene? Wow.
Who's the main character of Final Fantasy 6, though?
A lot of people.
I mean, I guess you could argue Locke, maybe, so you can...
Well, I'd say
I think Terra's the main character if you're
Locke,
going to pick
Terra,
somebody,
and maybe
honestly,
Celeste.
but... Anyway, moving on with the trivia.
I think Terra's more the main character of Act 1 than Celeste in Act 2.
Yeah, that's a good point. It feels like Terra's story, but then she drops out for a good... I mean, it could still be her story. Obviously, you could have your protagonist, not there for the second half of the story and have to make the comeback. So, I mean, that works, too. But Celeste really does take center stage after the world falls.
Yeah.
Alright, did you know that Final Fantasy VII's development team was historically largest... I think there's an article missing there. Was
Yeah.
the historically largest in its time, and included Hollywood CG artists. Again, we're missing an article. We need an A there. A Hollywood CG artist that worked on movies such as Jurassic Park and Terminator 2.
Wow.
Did you know that Final Fantasy VII was originally planned for the SNES and would have taken place in the real-world New York? I've never heard that part. I didn't know that it was planned for the SNES originally. I thought it was going to be on the Nintendo 64, and then the fact that Nintendo didn't go with discs but stuck with cartridges limited them technologically, so Square moved over to PlayStation.
Yeah. I know Square made like a little tech demo for the N64 and pretty much said, hey, we can't do anything with this.
But I mean, I guess to be fair, it could have started its life as a SNES project and just moved on as they moved up. But did you know that Final Fantasy had been taking place in real world New York? That would be interesting. I mean, I can't see the game the way it is taking place in New York.
Yeah.
It would be a very... I mean, some of the plot points could be the same, don't get me wrong, but...
We should be careful.
I mean, I assume the plot would have been much different. I assume that was way earlier in development.
I feel like it could be similar still.
Yeah.
But anyway, did you know that Final Fantasy VII was the first game in the main series that was in a modern style setting?
Yes.
Including decidedly modern technology such as cars, motorcycles, and TVs.
And now, like, every Final Fantasy game after it has been like that.
Did you know that Final Fantasy VII is the only main title with summons in which the player cannot fight any of them?
Man, they really fight no summons in that?
You get them all from materia.
Huh.
So... And yes, I will say,
Man, imagine fighting Knights of the Round.
I do think that the materia is inferior to the Espers in Final Fantasy VI and Magicite. I like that because once you learn it, your character has it. You take it off, you don't lose it. I mean, I guess it makes you a little overpowered, so you can make the argument that the materia is a little more balanced.
I like the job system from 5 the best.
Yeah, that's cool.
That can definitely be unbalanced.
But is it that much different than the job system in 3?
Yes. Because you can keep skills through classes, and also, if you master a class and go back to the bad class, you keep your stats.
In 3 when you take it off. That's right, I forgot about that.
So it's way more overpowered.
Yeah.
And way more customizable. Because in 3, you pretty much keep nothing between the classes.
But still, as a mechanic for me, I prefer Magicite over Materia. But one thing about in Materia's favor is you could have a lot more equipped.
Yeah.
Because you equip it to your weapons and armor, and they all have multiple slots, so...
But I mean, you can also become overpowered with Materia.
Well, you can't, especially once you can duplicate Materia.
I've really seen people do a thing where you just mimic Omni-Slash 13 times.
But at the same time, you're still only as powerful as the Materia you have equipped. If you take it off, you lose it.
13 Omni-Slashes.
I don't know if I've ever told the story here. The first time that I beat Final Fantasy VII, I didn't even have Omni-Slash for Cloud, so the first time I ever saw Omni-Slash was in that cutscene with Sephiroth.
Yeah, and
well, clearly I didn't have Omni-Slash, so I was somewhat underleveled. So the fight with Sephiroth, I know a lot of people say, oh, it's an easy boss battle, and I'm not going to say it's one of the hardest, but at that time...
easy if you go get Knights of the Round.
Well, I had Knights of the Round, but I only had one Knights of the Round. And you know, like I say, my group was a bit underleveled, so I mean, it was a tough battle for me, and I sat there and I fought through it and finally, yes, I beat it. And then all of a sudden, it's like Cloud versus. I'm like, no, there's more. And then Cloud just wails on him with Omni-Slash, and that is one of the most satisfying moments in video game history when Cloud just finally takes everything out on Sephiroth after everything Sephiroth and Jenova put Cloud through.
And I assume you didn't do the super bosses either.
I honestly don't remember.
Which actually weren't in the original game. They're added in the international version.
Well, if they weren't in the original game, then I did not do them.
No, they weren't in the original Japanese game.
Oh, right, U.S. being international. Duh. Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I may have done one or none at all. Dude, I mean, that was 98. I got it when it first came out, but I didn't actually finish it until 98.
Because if you did do at least one of them, you should have had the Master Summon material. Which would be another Knights of the Round.
Well, I would have had to have done a specific one.
Yeah.
But you're probably right, I probably didn't. I was just more interested in getting through the story, not trying to get as built up as I could. I was really into the story of the game. I think the story of the game is fantastic.
Yeah, that's what emerald weapon you need for that?
I don't
Doesn't
remember.
ruby weapon just give you a golden chocobo or something?
I don't remember. You can check that out on YouTube too. We beat the super bosses. That was one of some of our early videos when we weren't doing full Let's Plays.
And also, one time you load up your save file, and let me fight Sephiroth. And then at the very end,
You had the counter material on, and he attacked you, and you just beat him with a simple little snicked.
Yeah, Cloud like automatically counters whatever. So freaking Sephiroth attacked me, and then
But you did have the Buster Sword on, which made it look cool. Not as cool as Omni Slash, but
that's honestly one of the things I really like about the remake, is that you can keep the Buster Sword the entire time and it'll be just as viable as any other weapon.
is it though? I mean, wouldn't you still be a little stronger with other weapons?
A tiny bit, but not as much.
Not to the point that you would be.
It's not as much as having like a 1 attack weapon versus like a 100 attack weapon.
Yeah, I mean, I think here's something that would be cool, and you have the materia in place already. If you could just build up your weapon, like you keep the same weapon because it's a really cool, iconic weapon, but you just make it stronger rather than getting new weapons. You know?
Yeah, kind of like in the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Yeah. But this wouldn't, there wouldn't, I don't even, in my mind, there's not even an option to, everybody has their main weapon, and that's it, and you just build it up. There's no switching out weapons. Maybe you could switch out weapons, maybe you could switch out armor or other things, but anyway, let's get back to trivia, because I should probably get through this before this video is done. Did you know that, I'm sorry, I scrolled up accidentally. Final Fantasy VII is the only main title without Flan? I guess they mean the enemy Flan?
Yeah, the Flan enemy. Does Final Fantasy 1 have it?
By name? I don't know.
I don't remember any of
I'm not sure the
Flans.
NES version has it anyway. Maybe the Famicom does. But maybe there's a version of it. But did you know Final Fantasy VII was the second game to involve time travel? Wait, what? When you time travel in Final Fantasy VII? Am I losing my mind here?
I don't remember any time
I don't remember any time travel in Final Fantasy VII.
I mean, you just see the future. I don't think that's time travel.
I don't even remember time... I remember time travel in Chrono Trigger.
What Final Fantasy games have time travel?
That's what I'm saying. Like actual time, not like cutting back and forth and seeing different periods, but I mean actual time travel.
Yeah.
There's no time travel in Final Fantasy VII. I mean, somebody right now is like typing up a huge explanation of you don't remember this part of the game, and maybe I'm just crazy, but
I can't think of any other.
it has been a little while since we played. I can't remember it in Final Fantasy VII. Forget any other one.
Do you remember any of the other 6 games?
I mean, no, you have like different. Now, I mean, there's like a time skip in Final Fantasy VI, but that's not time travel.
Yeah.
And like in 4, you go to like the underworld, but that's not time travel.
Definitely not time travel.
3, we just played through 3. Was there anything in 3?
Not that I can think of.
Well, now, okay, Final Fantasy 1 does involve time travel.
Oh yeah, but definitely Final Fantasy 1.
You don't so much time travel. You do time travel, I guess, when you go into the Temple of Fiends Revisited, but it's not so much a mechanic in the game. It's just a plot device.
Yeah, I mean, I assume it would be something like that for Final Fantasy 7, but I don't remember in Final Fantasy 7 time.
So I assume that's that. I assume that's the other one. But
Did they mean a different one? Did they actually type 7?
hold on, I clicked on the. Hold on, we gotta explore this. I clicked on the link. Time travel is a recurring motif in the Final Fantasy series, which focuses on carrying people through time and possibly allowing them to change their fate.
One more secret
Final Fantasy we already covered. That one's obvious. It says Final Fantasy 2. Doomion's past is experienced firsthand in the Arcane Labyrinth.
Okay.
I don't remember Final Fantasy 2 well enough to comment on that. Final Fantasy 5, although not strictly time traveling, the Phantom Village can be visited in the present time, even though the point of view of the inhabitants is 1,000 years in the past. But they clarify that's not strictly time travel. But if you're going to count Final Fantasy 2, that means there's been at least 2 with time travel before 7, even assuming 7 has time travel. And yeah, they jumped to Final Fantasy 8. There's no time travel in Final Fantasy 7.
Maybe they meant Final Fantasy 8 and then hit 7.
Maybe I misread it? I misread it. It was Final Fantasy 8.
Ah.
I'm sorry.
When you time travel in Final Fantasy 8, you haven't played it. But I don't
Yeah, I've played like the first hour of the game. I apologize.
We have it. We'll eventually play it.
So, stop, reset, rewind. Did you know Final Fantasy 8 was the second game to involve time
Oh, wow.
travel?
Final Fantasy 8? But wait, doesn't Final Fantasy 2?
But yeah, if it's in Final Fantasy 2, it's obviously in the original Final Fantasy, so that would make it the third one. Alright, did you know that Final Fantasy... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Did you know the waltz scene in Final Fantasy 8 was made into a PS2 technical demo?
No.
Well, did you know that Final Fantasy 8 was the first game in the series to utilize realistically proportioned character models and motion capture to do character animations?
And then...
Oh, come on. Clearly the overworld sprites in Final Fantasy 7 were based on real-world models.
Yeah, of course.
I know you hate those characters, but I don't
Oh
think they
my
look
God.
that bad in-game. Dude, please tell me you're at least dying to the final boss of this place.
Oh, no, I'm not the boss yet.
Dude, we're an hour into this video almost. I'm gonna run out of trivia before you get to the boss. Did you know that the Final Fantasy VIII demo was rated M in North America?
Wow. But you gotta admit, the Final Fantasy 8 models look way better than the Final Fantasy 7 models.
Okay. You don't expect games to advance as the technology improves?
No, I expect them to advance.
I will take the polygon models in Final Fantasy VII over anything on the Nintendo 64 of that ilk. Now, not something like Paper Mario, which is clearly designed to look completely different, but I can't stand polygonal Mario or Link on the Nintendo 64. I just don't think they don't look that bad in Final Fantasy VII, and with the environments looking so good, and it's just in certain parts of the game, and like in the battles, I mean, I don't know, it works for me. And the atmosphere, and the story, and just the interesting characters, I know they're not the greatest models, but, and I've never been a huge fan of polygonal graphics. I've always preferred sprite-based graphics, but...
Oh my god.
Boobs. Anyway, back to the trivia. Did you know that Renoa is the playable party rather than Safer and Selfie in the Final Fantasy VIII demo? Should I keep going at this point? Because we never played any of these Final Fantasies. It wouldn't even mean that much to us.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh my god, why don't... you guys can distract the hill giggers while I'm trying to freaking defeat this
You realize
thing.
if I keep going, you're going to have to... You can't cut any of this out.
Alright, I'll just do it quicker.
Alright, did you know the final track Raid on Dolet in the Final Fantasy VIII demo was replaced by the landing in the final game, and Raid on Dolet never appeared in the game's original soundtrack? Did you know Final Fantasy IX was the last game in the main series to use the classic active time battle system? Did you know the decision on whether Final Fantasy IX was going to be part of the main series or not was only made fairly late in its development? Did you know Final Fantasy IX contains allusions and references to all previous main series Final Fantasy games, numerous spin-off games, and other Square games?
Yeah.
Should play Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah.
Did you know between all Final Fantasy games, Hironobu Sakaguchi and Final Fantasy IX is his favorite?
Nice.
Did you know Final Fantasy IX contains a well-hidden side quest that remained undiscovered by most Western gamers until 13 years after the game's release?
Wow, what's the side quest?
I don't know. If I click on this, I don't know if it'll take me to it. Apparently, it involves the Nero family. The Nero family, Zenero and Benero, and consists of 10 members in Final Fantasy IX. Two featured most prominently are Zenero and Benero, often known as the Nero brothers, who are members of the Tantalus Theater Troupe. The other members of the clan are Genero, Denero, Pinero, Venera, Zanera, Genera, Danera, and Panera. The family members whose names end with RO are male, and the ones whose names end with RA are female. The females always end their dialogue with a heart symbol. Panera appears to be the youngest as she is smaller than the others. Okay. What's the point?
Daddy. Daddy. Where's Daddy?
That's a big dude. I'm not sure if this... Apparently there's a gambling mini-game, but that's not really a side quest. Oh, Lost Family side quest. I bet this is it. During endgame, a new side quest becomes accessible, whereas the Dane must repeatedly visit the Tantalus hideout in Lindblom's Theater District and talk to the various Nero family members. Starting with Benero and Zanero, a member of the Nero family will appear, saying the others are missing, then go and look for them. Each time the Dane returns to the hideout after a major event or battle in Memoria, the final dungeon, a new member will be there, saying all the previous members are missing. This can be done repeatedly until Death Guise is defeated, the last major event that will trigger a new scene at the hideout. After the scene with Panera, the final Nero family member, Zidane, will comment on the huge family, and a treasure chest will appear within the hideout with a protect ring inside. The side quest can be advanced with every major event and battle in Memoria, and there are more Memoria events than necessary to complete the quest. This means the player can still complete the quest even if they do not return to the hideout after every event. If the player completes the side quest and continues to trigger more events in Memoria, the side quest will seemingly start over again, and it can be completed twice as there are enough events to do so, although there is no additional reward.
Huh. No one.
I hate side quests that come after the end game.
That seems like an annoying side quest. It's like, oh, I did one thing in the final dungeon, now I go to this, or I go back to the...
Like, I don't mind the idea of there still being stuff to do and you can still play game, but...
Yeah. Alright, I think I'm finally at the boss.
Like, I don't like the idea of something that only triggers at the end game, because it's... For me, once I beat the story of a game, I'm probably not going to go back and play it again, unless I just replay through the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm not much for playing a heavily story-based game beyond the story. Anyway, back to trivia. Final Fantasy X is the first game in the series with voice acting. I forgot it was all set up as Did You Know. Final Fantasy X is the second game in the main series to do away with character levels. Final Fantasy X is the last single-player game in the main series to allow the player to name the main character.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because I guess they say the name too much in all the others.
Yeah, I guess if you're using voice acting, that could be an issue.
But don't say the name of the characters. Give them like a title or something.
Yeah, but that can get annoying too in games, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy X was originally planned to include online elements. Final Fantasy X is the first main series game to allow you to switch characters in the middle of battle. The logo of Final Fantasy X is the first to bear Yoshitaka Amando's signature visible in the bottom right corner of the logo. I'm going to pause there, since there seems to be like a little intro cutscene here.
It's time for a boss. I'm the boss. A behemoth.
I played Final Fantasy VI.
There were no behemoths in Final Fantasy 1. Did you know?
Yeah. I'm not sure that 6 is really when they were introduced, but I remember them in 6, so I'm going with that.
Isn't this the throne room from 15?
Probably. This is based on 15.
Yeah, this is the throne room from 15. Wow.
Dude, anybody else in the mood to do a Legends all around?
Okay, well, you can do some more trivia while I fight this thing. Oh, God.
Yeah, I'll get back to you in just a second. Oh, man. Okay. The PAL version of Final Fantasy X-2 was released one day before the international version.
Huh.
Final Fantasy X-2 is the only game in the series to have an all-female playable cast. Final Fantasy XI was the first planned to be a game for the... Huh? Oh, Final Fantasy XI was first planned to be a game for the PlayStation. But wasn't 10 on PlayStation 2?
Yeah, well...
I guess 11 was the first online game, so maybe they were experimenting with an online game before. Or they just had the storyline.
The concept kind of became Final Fantasy 11.
The notorious Final Fantasy XI super boss, Absolute Virtue, allegedly caused people to quit the game over its difficulty. That's a weird bit of trivia there. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have quit a lot of games over a lot of difficult things. The servers of Final Fantasy XI are named after Final Fantasy summons. Final Fantasy XI was the first RPG to prompt a change in state law.
What?
I have no idea. There's no clickable link or anything, so...
Who knows?
There are at least 3,500, but that also implies that non-RPG games have caused changes in state laws. This is the first role-playing game, too. There are at least 3,500 and counting separate enemies in Final Fantasy XI, more than any other game in the series. Final Fantasy XII is the earliest game in Ivalice's mythos. That's literally the only tribute for Final Fantasy XII. That's all they could bother for 12.
Alright.
Final Fantasy XIII is the only main title Final Fantasy that heals all characters between battles. Final Fantasy XIII was the fastest selling game in the series at the time of its release, having sold over 1.7 million copies in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of hype for 13. Final Fantasy 15 was originally going to be a 13 spin-off.
I'm kind of surprised at that, because don't a lot of people hate Final Fantasy 13? Isn't
Yeah,
that
but
one
when
of
it
the
was
least
coming out,
favorites?
there was a lot of hype for it.
I would have thought 7 would have been the biggest selling one. I know it is overall, but there was a lot of hype for 7 too when it came out, so... Final Fantasy XIII is the only main title game to spawn a trilogy, dubbed the Lightning Saga.
Yeah, somehow I still got 3 games, and I've heard that the second and third game are bad. What the frick is that?
The Dragon King. Let's see. All voiced cutscenes in Final Fantasy XIV version 1.0 are in English, regardless of the version played.
Including the Japanese version?
Apparently.
That's odd.
Apparently, your sister's cat needed to get her 2 cents in.
I'm making my toe.
Okay, Alex, the cat's looking for you. Okay, now back down to your lair.
Mega Flare!
Alex, Johnny wants to come with you. Alright, back to Trivial Pursuits. The credits roll of Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn is nearly 2 hours long because of the inclusion of Legacy Campaign participants' names. Players used their Gubu mounts to form protective walls around Ul'dah during the final 7th Umbral Era events in Final Fantasy XIV. That sentence made absolutely no sense to me. Like, I understand
I
in
played
concept,
Final Fantasy 14, that makes no sense. I haven't played that far into it, but...
the fact is mentioned as a canon event in Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn. That's neat. Final Fantasy XV has had the longest development time of any game in the franchise.
Yeah, it started as a 13 spin-off. Final Fantasy vs. 13.
Final Fantasy XV was originally a PlayStation 3 exclusive spin-off title, Final Fantasy Vs. 13.
Wow.
Final Fantasy XV is the only game in the series with set characters to have no female playable characters. Now, you contradicted that earlier.
Well, maybe she's not playable, but she joins your party.
Well, I think that was the whole point, is that it had to be a playable character.
Right?
Tetsuya Nomura briefly entertained the idea of making Final Fantasy XV into a musical. That would be amazing. That would make up for it being an action RPG.
Isn't Tetsuya Nomura the guy who does Kingdom Hearts?
I don't know, but a musical RPG would be amazing.
I'm sure there's musical RPGs.
He's a video game director and character designer at Square Enix. He was selected as the main character designer for Final Fantasy VII.
Woo! Dang it, dang it, dang it, dang it, dang it.
He went on to be the monster designer for... Well, he actually... What?
Isn't he the one that puts all the belts on characters? The character in Final Fantasy X has like a dress of belts.
Well, let's see. He started as a debugger for Final Fantasy IV. He was a monster designer for Final Fantasy V. Graphic director in charge of monster designs of Final Fantasy VI. And he also designed Shadow and Setzer. and storyboarded some of the cutscenes. He was the character designer on Final Fantasy VII. He also worked on some of the characters' stories in Final Fantasy VII. He was the lead character designer and battle visual director for Final Fantasy VIII. He also designed characters for Final Fantasy X, X-2, 11, and 13. He directed he directed Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
This is the series Kingdom Hearts. He also directed the CGI sequel to Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children. The sequel to Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children.
Yeah.
Not to make anybody confused, and there was no sequel to Advent Children. He was also the character designer for The World Ends With You.
The World Ends With You is awesome. Trust me, I played it. I played the Switch version, and it's kind of.
And he was apparently the head of production for Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
And he worked on the Final Fantasy VII remake.
It was nice putting more versus 13 stuff into Kingdom Hearts.
But tell me that wouldn't be awesome. A musical role-playing game?
That would be awesome.
Let's see, trivia. Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy XII, and Final Fantasy XIII are the only main series games to have as many females as males in the party. I mean, technically Final Fantasy V would as well. It just happens to have more, eventually.
I guess they mean exactly the same.
Yeah, I understand, but it's not how it's worded. Final Fantasy II Dimensions has more summons than any other game in the series at over 180.
I haven't played Final Fantasy Dimensions 2. I played the original one, it's pretty good.
Final Fantasy The Mystic Quest was the first game to be released in North America before it was released in Japan. I assume they mean the first Final Fantasy game. I doubt it was the first game ever to be released in North America first. I also heard that's the first Final Fantasy ever released in Europe.
Yeah, so...
Which, I mean, I feel really bad I feel bad for European gamers.
If that was your first Final Fantasy, I feel bad for you in general.
That's what I was getting at. What do you think I meant?
I mean, yeah, but...
The first Final Fantasy... Oh. The first Final Fantasy game released in Europe was Final Fantasy Mystic Quest.
Wow, we're doing more trivia than trivia then. Oh, fuck. How the fuck do I stop that?
Fight with caution.
The city of Final Fantasy shares its Japanese release date, December 18th, with the original Final Fantasy.
Wow.
I did not. Now I knew Final Fantasy originally released in 1987. I did not know the date. I know it released in like summertime in the U.S., but that was in '90s. So I say that I'm not sure. I know because it didn't release in summer, did it? I got it for my birthday in 1990, but it had to have released before that. Because I remember looking at Nintendo Power with my friends at school and reading about Final Fantasy originally. I mean, I guess it could have been preview issues. Like, hey, here's this upcoming game. Anyway, Final Fantasy Type 0 was originally a game for cell phones entitled Final Fantasy Agito 13.
Yeah, and then that another 13 spin-off.
Apparently. The Final Fantasy Legend and its two sequels are not actually Final Fantasy games, but are instead part of the Saga series.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VIII are the only games... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy XIII are the only games...
Do I have the Final Fantasy Legends games? Sorry.
We have the new collection on Switch, yeah.
Yeah.
I had one of them on Game Boy, but I don't have it anymore.
I know, I beat the boss.
Oh, cool. I still have a fair amount of trivia.
Well, guess I'll have to be next episode.
I don't have that. I don't have enough for a whole episode, though.
Depends how quickly you can get the next episode done. Like, gotta pick up this equipment.
But really quickly, Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy XIII are the only games in the main series where magic is a rarity tied into the plot instead of being an element in everyday life.
Yeah, because in Final Fantasy 13, they get the magic from, like, special quest things that they get from big old Titan guys.
Well, I don't know. How many times have you played Final Fantasy 15?
And then they become, let's see, wait, Final Fantasy 13.
No, I was responding to
Oh,
Jack.
I'm sorry.
Obsolete world.
And then they become like Lacies, but then they have to complete a quest, or they turn into a quest. They have to complete a quest, or they'll turn into like a zombie thing. But if they do complete the quest, they get frozen crystal.
Then we inject darkness to reverse the course, or reset the world.
But only Lacies can cast magic.
Lufenia is a glittering jewel, a utopia. Uncontrollable variables have no place here.
Are the visions I'm seeing from this Lufenia? Is that where I come from? I'm just another one of their gifts.
Welcome to Jack's Joker arc.
Yeah.
And you. They just left you behind, didn't they?
Oh, it is them.
Wait!
The bats. The bats.
It's interesting the way they turned the Lufenians into villains in this.
Man, we should get a whole game of Lufenia. Final Fantasy Lufenia. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode. Got the internet. Like and subscribe. Go to that video. And most importantly,
Did you know that Final Fantasy VII is a better game than Dylan gives it credit for?
good night.
Gabba the game night, yay. Come on and watch him play games every other day. If you subscribe now, you won't miss out on any of the action. So come on, click that subscribe button.